We'll wait for a couple of stragglers. I can see one coming and another one. And another one. If you read Joanne Scholl's profile of,
Can you be a little louder?
oh,
I don't know. Maybe Dean has to adjust that.
Dean, do you adjust? You adjust this? Okay. If you read the profile, then you have a good background into where I was born, things that happened in my life that brought me here. And so I'm going to skip that part, but I want to mention that when you're looking at slides like this, it's very hard to get a feeling for how big is this, because it's on a little slide. And putting this perspective of details about a landmass is a little difficult. So I thought I'd just give you some statistics here. The square mileage of New Zealand is 1,000 square miles. The state of California is 1,064 square miles. So very compatible in terms of size, but you can't compare New Zealand to America. So we went this way, and looking at the population, it may not surprise you that California has, let me see, California has 395 square miles, 3,950 square miles. So it's about 8 times the size of New Zealand, or New Zealand is about 1/8 of California. The population, though, is kind of surprising. The population in New Zealand is 5.2 million, and in California, it's 39.5 million. So you can see, driving around New Zealand, you won't be in too many traffic jams. And I have actually been very fortunate. My mother was born on the west coast of the South Island, which is a very unique little community because they support each other because it's very isolated. When she married, she came to the North Island, and I was born in the North Island. And so we'll start by turning on the projector here. I think that's me squealing.
Stand to the side and not right in front of the speaker. It sometimes helps.
Okay. I'm going to take this. This shot was taken by my in-laws as they came down to New Zealand to visit their daughter, who I married. And this is a shot out of the plane as it's getting ready to land in Nandi, which is Fiji. And this is a stopover that they felt they needed to take. And it's such a huge journey to travel from Chicago to Houston to New Zealand and return. Basically, you have gone around the globe. And so they took some shots here. This is in New Zealand, And the picture there is shredded timber. And our forests grow about 4 times as fast as many other forests. And these chips are sent by ship to Japan to make particle board for housing. This is a shot to give you an idea of what a Maori costume would be for a female. And the bodice goes down to just above the hips, and the flax skirt there is quite a production, because as they let it dry and shred some of the material out of it, they then burn it to make the patterns that they need. This is something that I can't even explain what it is, but to me it looks like some fields. You're probably all familiar with stalactites and stalagmites. We do have a number of caves in New Zealand that this one is one of those caves. This now is heading down towards the South Island in the Alps, flying, of course, in. This is one of the glaciers, one of 2 glaciers. One's called the Franz Josef, and the other one is called the Fox. And they are shrinking a little with the climate change. This is in Wellington now, this is in Christchurch, the South Island, which Christchurch is on the coast, basically in the middle of the island. And the waterways penetrate into the landmass down and by these arms that stick out. And sometimes the beach.
Was that in the South Island? That last slide, was that in the South Island?
Sorry, I'll back up. Yes, it was in the South Island. You can see our economy is heavily driven by farming, both sheep, beef cattle, and dairy cattle. And there's been an explosion in the last 5 years with dairy cattle because the prices overseas for powdered milk and dairy products has really been a worthwhile change in the way they draw money from the agricultural finesse. Cows in a pasture are pretty common. Here's some beef cows. The shoreline in New Zealand is, because they're so small, the islands, we have a huge shoreline. Many rocky beaches, some sandy, some pebbles, just depending on the area. Excuse me?
I said, that's a fantastic shot.
That's down the South Island with the Alps in the background and lakes. This is just a shot of our forest. And it's hardly we call it a bush, because a lot of the growth in many of these places are not so much trees, but panga ferns. They're quite tall. They can reach like up to the edge of that roof. And these fronds, Maoris use them for various artifacts. New Zealanders are great on gardens. This is one in my hometown. And they have botanical gardens, and many of those displays like you see here with this clock. This is a item called broom. It's almost a weed. And that is a typical scene down in the South Island where you've got a lake and you've got the horizon with the mountain range. And they squeeze some of these little villages in amongst the hills. The native population are called Maori, and very different from Australia. I remember my in-laws showed some slides to the Farm Bureau Co-op, and one person came out to me at the end of us and talked about the Aborigines of New Zealand. I said, no, the Aborigines are in Australia, and New Zealand are called Maori. Very, very different in skin tone, and the artisans are very different between those two countries.
Is that a church?
No, it's really not a church. It's a pa. It's a gathering place. Pa meaning a place to gather. And of course, it's all those, that V that forms the roof line is all carved out. If you get up close, there's that power shell that we looked at. They cut little circles and make that the eye of the figure that they're displaying in that carving. Let's see here, I'm still, oh, sorry, I got the wrong one. And you can see those eyes there. That's that power shell that I was talking about in that carving. Those ferns that you see alongside down the bottom there are the punga ferns that I was talking about. Huge fronds, and our bush sportsmen who shoot for deer and things like that don't like to hunt in New Zealand too much because of the undergrowth. You just can't walk through. I mean, you fight your way through this bush. And those fronds have a brown textured ribbon-like thing that if you touch it, you'll itch for quite a while. So there's lots of disadvantages pushing your way through the bush. There's a hut, a Maori hut, and this is a stockade that forms the Maori pa. And this is where you greet distinguished guests and what have you, and they conduct these displays of dancing and challenge. They challenge a dignitary coming in, and then just before things seem to be getting out of hand, they'll lay a spear down in front of her, and that means when a person picks that up, they are then immune from being challenged again. Here's just some nice scenery of some of the lakes in the South Island. Now this is very typical up north in the North Island, where yachting is a very big deal. I don't know whether some of you would know that the America's Cup was held by America for many years, and the New Zealanders competed against them and won the cup, and it has remained in New Zealand for 3 challenges. So New Zealanders are famous for their yachting and their skill in sailing. Lots of waterfalls. Beaches. Okay, in the middle there right in the middle, you can't tell, but there's a big lake called Lake Taupo. It's famous for rainbow trout, and its water is so pure because it's snow runoff that you can use it in batteries. Cape Maria Van Diemen, the very tip up there, is the extension of a small area, but it's 90, that little stem that sticks out is 90 miles long. There's a beach that these buses take tourists, and they drive along that beach at low tide when the sand is very solid, and then they look out from that vantage point at the end of that, and you see the convergence of two different oceans. The Tasman Sea coming in from Australia, and the Pacific Ocean coming in from the right. And as you look down from this vantage point, you can see all these little ripples as the two tides and waters tend to converge. It's quite spectacular. Now we're on the road. These are called lupin. Anyone heard of lupin? It's a bush that grows with different flower colors, sometimes yellow. And this is an indication of our where we earn our money. This is lambing, and the population on a piece of property is very, because the growth of the grass is so good with a temperate climate, it's very good for grazing stock. This tree on the left here is called a cabbage tree. Very popular for possums to climb up and make a den in there. The mountain range, of course, covered in snow, makes an ideal shot, especially with water and bush on the side.
Is that snow year-round, or does it melt off?
Pretty much, yes. Pretty much year-round. The English decided to settle mostly in the North Island. The Scottish people, they settled in the South Island. Dunedin and Christchurch were sort of named by them. And so they gravitated to what climate they were used to from the home country. And you can see the growth is pretty luxurious. I don't think the sea looks that blue in most cases. It's one of those shots that so it's pretty rugged country, but it's ideal for sheep and cattle farming. There is snow on the mountain ranges in line with that tree line. Whoa. That's a weed that grows to a bush about 5 feet high, and then these fronds come up, and it's called by a Maori name, toi toi. There are many places in New Zealand that are named with Maori names, and anyone who's traveled there find it difficult pronouncing some of the Maori names. And certainly, if you've got a GPS guide, they will pronounce the names. And to a New Zealander, they really mangle some of the Maori-sounding names. In the middle of the North Island, we have the active volcano, the one and only. There are actually three volcanoes: Mount Ruapehu, Tongariro, and I need my and here, and Narahoe. Narahoe is the one that erupts. It kicks up this dust into the air, and airplanes have to fly around that. It is so chock full of sediment that it's in danger of damaging the motors of planes, especially jet planes. Some more shots of being on the road. This is a chateau in the North Island that is famous for visitors from overseas who want to come and ski. You can see there's lots of areas behind the chateau. This is one of the monuments that's in I'm trying to think of the name. There's a clock tower, and my hometown has a clock tower in the main road. And that's fairly common for some cities in New Zealand. That's a farmers co-op, and I guess there's a co-op here in Huntington. There's a farmers co-op group that my father-in-law belonged to. This is looking at sheep country. And New Zealanders take pride in their gardens. This is taking a ferry across from one island to another, and you're looking at extinct volcanoes. You can tell the shape of that rocky outlet in the middle there. This boat is coming into what they call the Marlborough Sounds, and it carries cars, so people can drive down the North Island, load their car into these ferries, and they will let them out in a place called Nelson, which is the top of the South Island, and they drive around and then they come back. Okay, there's an indication. That arrow is pointing at those pieces of land that jut out that these boats travel through and up to the final harbor in Nelson. To your right, in the North Island, right where that red dot is my hometown called Fielding, and my uncle started something. He was in the motel business, and all the visitors were told this is friendly Fielding, and you notice in the bulletin we talked about friendly New Zealand, but he had the board of the city change the name about when they were doing promotional materials about coming to Fielding. The flow of water between the two islands is very tricky for these captains of these boats that carry passengers and cars to the South Island because of the squeezing and the violence of the rip. And so there was one major boat that sank in the harbor. So Christchurch is in the middle on the right-hand side. The west coast of that island we'll be talking about a little more later on. The North Island is a bit obscure. Gold mining was something that was pursued early in the century, and this is a stream that is sort of typical of where they pan for gold. And they were so successful in extracting some gold that on the West Coast they had a gold dredge. And my parents took my sister and I down there, and we got to walk up on the dredge. It has a big scoop that lifts the soil from the bottom of a big pond, and they pour that onto a tray, and it shimmies down, and the gold drops to the bottom. And that's a brief explanation of the gold dredge. But seeing it in operation was quite a special treat for my sister and I. These are just scenes. Okay, now it's the first. We're just going to take a break for a minute. They switch. I'm going to have to take this off so I can see what I'm doing. Oh, that's hot.
About 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
They want to take questions.
Okay, all right. We can take questions now rather than load another one. Okay, so I guess we need to close. I've got one more carousel, but let's take questions. Yes.
You grew up there, what brought you here?
What is her name?
What is my name?
No. What brought you here? And I said, what is her name?
Oh, what is her name? Her name was Lana. She was the one who was demonstrating that Maori costume. It's quite a story to that because I played basketball with what they call a League of Nations. We had one from Scotland, one from a Chinese family, one from a Scottish family, and my Maori basketball friend watched that lady do a poi dance, which she learned at Manchester College because they had a Polynesian influence. There was a Polynesian student came from American Samoa, and Lana got to meet her, and we actually visited her in American Samoa later. But as a result of the emphasis on Polynesian culture, Lana learned this dance called a poi dance, which is a string with a knitted ball on the end, and you have two, and they twirl these as they do this dance. And my friend and his wife and family had Lana dance. And about 6 months later, they brought me that costume. They were so impressed with her learning to do basically a Maori dance, and made that bodice and the skirt. So that's the story behind that.
Well, Graham, I have an opening in January if you want to show us the second set of slides in January.
We'll see.
Well, it is 4:30 and we appreciate so much what you've done to get ready.
Okay.
We'll talk about seeing the rest of your pictures.
Okay. All right. All right.
Thank you for being here.
Okay. Where's my